On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, SGA has his first ever 50-point game against the Utah Jazz. He says it's not his best. Do we agree with that? We'll break down this Jazz game and the Mavericks tonight coming up.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, me member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. On today's show, we're joined by Brandon Rabaron at Brandon Rabaron on Twitter and dailythunder.com, as well as 1077 The Franchise, where I also was on 1077 The Franchise today. We're also a part of the OKC Dream Team. On today's show, brought to you by Game Time, we're diving into Shai scoring his first ever 50-point game. The Thunder getting a win, taking care of business against the Utah Jazz, no matter the fact that it wasn't as pretty as other wins have been this season, and taking on the Mavericks again. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Brandon, man, what a game this was. I mean, you enter this game, not a ton of juice. Like, there's the question marks of if J-Dub was going to play. He did. We'll get to him coming up. It's the Jazz, the spread at our good friends over at FanDuel, 17.5. I mean, the best part about entering today, was that David Locke was in town. But besides that, it was like, just get me to Thursday. Just get me to the Mavs game. Something exciting. And then all of a sudden, Jazz come out frisky, the Jazz get a lead, and you're thinking, okay, just get through this game now. Like, just go take care of the Jazz come hell or high water. And then Shai goes for 54 points, 5 assists, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks, 17 for 18 from the free throw line, 3 for 10 from the three-point line, and 17 for 35, 48%. He almost made half of his shots in a 54-point game in this one. His first ever 50-point game on the heels of tomorrow, like before the Mavs game, he'll be announced as an all-star starter for the second time in his career. Alex Caruso lobbed that he's one of the greatest scorers of all time. I tend to agree. But how do you take in Shai's first ever 50-point night?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, the atmosphere coming in, it was like, oh, Wednesday night against the Jazz, like last place in the West. Like you said, didn't have much juice. What a cool night for everybody in attendance tonight that decided to come out in the cold in Oklahoma City to watch this game. Hey, and to the credit of the Jazz, they actually played their guys tonight. Like, John Collins had missed 8 games in a row. Colin Sexton had missed 2 out of the last 3, and then Lauri Markkanen had missed 4 in a row. So they put up a fight. And so I'm starting with that because they get the assist because they actually played the Thunder close enough tonight to where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander actually had to play a fourth quarter. Look what happens, Rylan. When Shai gets to play a full game, he goes for 50 points. Now, I thought that Shai, it's funny because in the post game, Mark Daigneault first said that he didn't even really think it was, Shai's best game of the season. Then Shai comes out later and says, I honestly didn't really think it was my best game I've had of the season. And I tend to agree with both of those guys. Shai, obviously incredible tonight. The 50-point game was long overdue. Several times this season, he could have had the chance to go for 50, but he didn't get to play a full game. And he's just not the kind of player that's going to gun for his own points and for his own achievements. But it came organically. And best of all, it came in a game that was close. And they actually needed all those 54 points to win tonight. And he went on a little run in the fourth quarter that the Thunder actually needed to win this game. So not only does he go for 54, but he doesn't within the game, and he did it to win the game. So great night from Shai. And it was cool to see on this random Wednesday against the Utah Jazz, a tanking team, you got to see, Shai's career high in points tonight.
Shai's career high in points, it previously was, 45, 46 once he hit that bucket tonight. Then he got to 54. First and foremost, the craziest thing that I have taken away from this is, like, before studying the box score, I said on my Locked On NBA recap, because we send in these 60-second clips to recap on game nights from somebody who was, there covering the game. And I said, it wasn't the most efficient night from Shai, and he still got to 54 points. He still hit the shots down the stretch, and it could have been even better because its efficiency was not from shot chucking, was not from bad shots. It was from the fact that Shai got to his spots at will, which necessitated the 35 shots, but some of them that he makes in his sleep did not fall tonight. But then you go study the box score. He made 48% of his shots, and we're sitting here saying that's not the most efficient Shai's been. Oh, that's not Shai's efficiency standard. Think about how crazy that is. That 48% on 35 shots on a 54-point night is like, okay, that's kind of just what he does, because he's right. How many times are those 10 games that Shai has not logged a single fourth quarter minute? As Caruso points out, a quarter of their games this season, SGA has been on the bench for 12 minutes in the fourth quarter. Think of how many times that's happened where Shai enters the fourth in that setting with 40. And a 10-point quarter for him is routine. I mean, that's just what he does, no matter the circumstances. So he could have had 50 earlier on. Like you said, the games have not been competitive enough to. Credit to Utah for making the score competitive enough to where you had to play Shai. And it even got dicey down the fourth quarter before he came in. It was a 1-point game. But I just think it's unreal that his standard is a 48% night is viewed as that's not efficient Shai. It's pretty damn efficient. That's pretty good. I believe Alex Caruso, man, he's an all-time scorer. You can dance around it. You can try to tap dance and walk on eggshells and not want to sound like a homer. He's an all-time great, and he's going to bear out to be an all-time great. And he's the closest thing. Like when you close your eyes, and this is going to hit the ear extremely funny, and I am ready for you to lob tomatoes and boo me off the pod. He's one of the closest things to Michael Jordan this game's ever seen. Like whenever my dad tells me these stories about Michael Jordan, when I go watch these documentaries about Michael Jordan, when I go watch the highlights about Michael Jordan, that's the stuff Shai's doing. It's improbable. He's not one of these guys who's doing it by these step back threes and hitting 6 threes, and that kind of boosts you right there. Now you just got to go do the rest. He's doing it all inside the arc. He's doing it by just meticulously getting to his spots, breaking down defenders, and fancy footwork and brute strength. I mean, how many times did you see him shoulder check Walker Kessler 5 feet away from his planted spot? Like Walker Kessler, he's 7 feet tall, 450. 7 feet tall, 240. And Shai is bulldozing him over. It's like it doesn't even matter. That's how strong this guy is in a guard body. This stuff doesn't happen every day. It's happened every day for us because we watch the Thunder every single day. It's not something to be taken lightly. I completely agree with Alex Caruso that no matter how you slice it, he's an all-time great scorer.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is, I watched Michael Jordan. I actually became a basketball fan because largely in part to Michael Jordan. First of all, Shai has spoiled us. When we talk about it wasn't his best, game of the season. 48%. That's how great he's been, how efficient he's been, that you can take a night like tonight. Yeah, he could have been better though. He said so, Mark said so, and we think so. That's how good he's been. But the MJ comparison, it's because he's got that throwback old school, he scores at the rim, he scores in the mid-range. He's got this really deep bag, and he's also a throwback two-way player. And Caruso mentioned it tonight. I love that he just kind of casually brought up, out of nowhere, Shai's one of the best scorers we've ever seen. And Caruso is like a student of the game. He said tonight, I watch a lot of basketball. This dude is like a basketball junkie. And so he knows what he's talking about. And I agree. When you look at modern players, that whole MJ Kobe, and not saying that, he's going to win 5 or 6 titles like MJ and Kobe and all this, but when you look at the game, you look at the efficiency, you look at the way he gets his points, you look at the two-way ability, you even look at the body type and some of the style and the way he gets to his spots, and just the dominance and how elite he is for a guard. And then you look at the numbers, the 30-point seasons. This is going to be Shai's third 30-point season in a row. That is MJ territory. And then you look at the steals and blocks combined with the scoring, combined with the efficiency. I mean, that's MJ stuff. And you don't usually see that kind of efficiency and defense all around game on high volume scoring from a guard, but we're seeing it from Shai.
You just don't. And Caruso, not just a student of history, but widely respected coast to coast as one of the best defenders in this league, who's had to defend every top active scorer in the NBA, including Shai. And he's one of these guys that just from being around him, he's media trained in the sense of he's very pointed with his words. Like he's not just going to throw stuff around, but he's also willing to let you in to like, hey, this is what I think. It's not just like the same 0-0 stuff that you might hear. He's like genuine up there. And so for him to sit there and genuinely say that Shai's an all-time scorer as a guy who's defended all-time scorers, I think is a big deal. I think you had to listen to the peers on that one. And like you mentioned with the defense, I know we're going to talk about the scoring a ton, and we'll talk about it again in the next segment. But another element of that Kobe influence, that MJ influence, like and Shai talks specifically about Kobe a lot, is just the competitiveness and the motor. Shai of the NBA as we know it, the modern NBA, he's earned the right to be a guy that doesn't try defensively in January, that doesn't give max effort in January. You see it all the time. In fact, there's way more stars who play that way than there are stars that don't. And Shai doesn't do that. Shai plays on both ends, 100 miles an hour. Every single minute he's on the court, he's breaking up lobs at the rim. He's getting blocks. He's getting steals. And I just continue to harp on this because I think it's so true. If Shai was on a different team that didn't have all these defenders that you're gawking at, Shai would be the best defender. He's not the best defender because you've got Caruso, you've got Cason, you've got Lou, you've got J-Dub, you've got Chet, you've got Hartenstein. So he's not the best defender on this team, but man, he would be the best defender on a ton of teams, and he's the very best two-way star in this league. Only rival to him is Giannis. I mean, for a two-way stardom that do it on both ends and do it efficiently and do it every night and play their pace, their way at will, no matter who's in front of them. You can talk about the Jazz being a lowly team, and I totally agree. They're one of the worst teams in basketball. But tonight they played all their guys, and tonight they had a formula that should have been troublesome. Not that any team can stop Shai, but Lauri Markkanen with all his size and length is blown by and is going to get mixed around on the dribbles. Of course, that happened tonight. But getting past him, what Shai did routinely, then you have Walker Kessler at the rim, where you do most of your damage at the rim. It's like you constantly had to battle through the trees in this game to play the way Shai likes to play. He took those battles on, he chopped the trees, and he ends up with a 50-point night, which gives you that freedom. Again, I agree with Mark and Shai. He's not some different player now that he's scored 50. He's not some different scorer now that he's scored 50. You're just now have the freedom to say it. You have the right of expression of, now that you've crossed this off your list, everybody can agree. He's went and got 50. He's went and averaged 30. He's been an all-star starter now twice, at 6:30 tonight. He'll be an all-star starter twice. So we all know that's coming. Like he's done it. He's checked it off the list. He's in the driver's seat right now for the scoring title. He's just an all-time great. And there's no real reservations needed on SGA because we've seen it consistently. His whole life's consistent, as he famously said, throughout this stretch. But coming up, we'll talk more on Shai. We'll talk J-Dub second half. We'll talk Queso, my favorite storyline of the day for Cason Wallace, and more. But first, Brandon, we got to talk about our good friends over at Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively in your life. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into your busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider, making getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is as simple as this. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your own home or even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance providers. And for most insured members, there is a zero copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener of the show, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support to the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA, promo code SPACE80. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Talk with Brandon Rabaron, DailyThunder.com, 1077 The Franchise Dream Team. Brandon, Shai, 50-point night, first night of a back-to-back. Now got to go play the Mavericks. And what's interesting about that game, which we're going to get to, injury reports for both sides won't come out until past noon tomorrow because both teams are on the second night of a back-to-back. But it just, what stands out to me about this Shai game, and I mentioned it briefly, but how true it is that nothing was left, that something was left on the table. Like it was not this game of like, hey, the Thunder are up 20. Let's just feed Shai the ball over and over and over and over and over again and let him lob up threes until he gets to 54. Man, you look at that first half, especially how many pull-ups in the mid-range that he hits routinely in and out. Or he short-armed it for the first time in a month. Like it could have been a massive game, and he ends up with 54. And that's all that matters. That's all that's going to count. But it just goes to show like how difficult it is to defend him. And then the Jazz didn't really have an answer in this game, and they didn't really try to pull up an answer. They felt confident in Lauri Markkanen for wrong reasons. But I mean, who else would you put on Shai? I know that Will Hardy. If the Jazz fans even care about this game, he'll get lambasted for not putting someone else on him. But you go down the Rolodex of options, certainly not putting Keontae George on him. That's a certain. Collier, no. Filipowski, no. Mikhailuk, no. Eubanks, we saw a few possessions that happened. Elijah Harkless is somehow in the NBA. No. Like they just didn't have another option to go to. I mean, you can make the argument for Sexton, but I believe he's too small. And then John Collins, they didn't try a ton, but they could have used him more to help. He just picked apart this Utah defense. And you can talk about the 16 lead changes and 14 ties and the fact that the Jazz, grew an 8-point lead in the first quarter. And yes, that's not great. It's not great that the Jazz got it within one in the final frame. Brandon, I'd much rather see this team win ugly than lose pretty. And they won 123-114. Any final thoughts on SGA's 54-point night?
No, I really, you're right though. The Jazz have nobody to slow down SGA. It was just, it's wild. I guess the final thing I'll say is he went from a career high of 45. He didn't just break it. He added 9 points to that. Like 45 to 54 is a huge leap. That is a big, big leap. And I just think it kind of goes to show Shai could be doing this more often. Not necessarily 54 points, obviously, but he could be routinely, gunning for his own shot more often if he wanted to. But he's a team player, and he's always going to choose the right play. And he's always going to kind of hunt the best shot, whether that's taking his own shot or setting the guys up for shots for his teammates. I think he's just an unselfish player, and you wonder, like, wow, Shai is like he's a routine 30-point scorer, but it's the first time he's ever gone for 50. Like, why is that? I think it's just his style of play. Like he's just not a selfish scorer. He's an efficient scorer and a scorer that takes the right shots, but also plays within the team. So I, though, was really happy to see him go for 50 finally, because this was a long time coming. So it was really cool to see, and really happy that it happened in OKC for the home fans to see it. And I thought it was cool that they were invested, obviously, like following his numbers, because like when he like released that mid-range jumper for the 50th shot, like there's an anticipation. You felt it in the crowd. Everybody stood up. He splashed it. Everybody in the arena, all 18,000 stood up, cheered, gave him a standing ovation. Very cool moment and much deserved for SGA, even though he's one of 82.
Yeah, one of 82, 0-0. They did announce it on the PA system that it was his career high 50 and all that jazz. It was like a reward for fans that actually made the trek to go watch the Utah Jazz. I mean, congratulations. You got more than you bargained for in this game. But I think that when you look at this game, I'm really excited for tomorrow afternoon, whenever First Take and all these other places get their hands on this game, because it's going to really expose some things. Let's just get out in front of it, Brandon. Nobody was watching Thunder Jazz tonight.
Right.
We'll be lucky if they actually do some homework and watch the highlights of this game. First of all, the free throws are going to be brought up, 17 for 18. The free throws were because they tried to guard Shai with a big all night. Of course, the big is slipping, sliding, clawing, scrapping, and fighting and punching all night against SGA, and that's going to lead to fouls. That's just what's going to happen. None of it was really anything that Shai was doing. He wasn't hooking Lauri Markkanen's arm. He wasn't jumping into the body of Lauri Markkanen. It was just straight up fouls, and that can't be really course corrected based upon the personnel that Utah has. And I just find it so impressive. I would like to ask our good friend Daniel Bell, who's a stat head guru, how many 50-point games from a guard have been brought to the table with just 3 made threes all night. Like you only got the 3 points, the 3 threes from the 3-point line. That's pretty impressive, and it just kind of shows the type of score that Shai is. But I did want to talk about Cason Wallace, who had a monster poster on Walker Kessler, a couple contact dunks in this game for him. He's in the 94th percentile in the regular season as a cutter. He's truly elite at reading the floor and bending the defense off the ball. And as Shai pointed out, it makes it easier for Shai and Jada, for the whole Thunder to tie their offense together. As Jalen Williams pointed out when I asked both of them about Cason cutting, he does all the little things right. And he's gotten better. He's always been good off the ball, but he's gotten better at reading the defense and reacting to what they're doing and seeing. It's kind of like in football, to make a second football analogy, because Mark already hit it out of the park with his first ever one where he called him Ed Reed, which is so true.
Yeah.
But to make a second football analogy, it's like the tight end running an option route, trying to find open grass, in his own defense. Like that's just what Cason's doing in a game like this. And I really thought that Mark's answer, while he didn't answer the direct question about Cason cutting, more so he answered it on a broader perspective of Cason continuing to improve year over year. And it's so obvious, but Mark pointed it out, and now you start to think about it. This is a guy who was drafted in the lottery. We all felt like he had a pretty high ceiling. This is a guy that can do it on the ball, do it off the ball, but was put into, as Mark called it, a narrow role as a rookie. Hey, you just go do these couple things, and that's how you're going to stay on the floor, and that's what you're going to do all your whole rookie year. And there's a certain aspect as a player that, like, Cason knows he could go if he was on a different team that wasn't a winning team that would have given him the more leeway. He could have been on the ball, and who knows what that could have looked like statistically. Who knows what that could have done to elevate his status? But he's doing more, mundane, more boring things of, hey, go be a cutter, go be a catch and shoot guy, go play elite defense. And he's taking that and within that role, he's still worked on the rest of his game to where now you're seeing him on the ball more. Now you're seeing him more involved in the offense. And it's paid off for him to just do the simple things his first year, continue working on his game in the offseason. His game is continuing to evolve. Now people are coming around to how high his ceiling was that we were talking about since they drafted him. And it's just really paying off for him. And it did so tonight in a massive way, as Cason was able to just dominate both ends. 13 points offensively. He had the 4 rebounds, the 1 assist, the 3 steals. There was a sequence where him and Caruso just refused to let Utah up the court past the timeline. He goes 6 for 8, 1 for 2 overall, and a couple of monster slams in this game. What did you make of Cason's night?
Yeah, I'm glad that you dedicated a whole segment to Cason because, like, SGA deserves all the kudos in the world for his night, and he's going to get all the headlines. So I wouldn't want Cason's night to be lost in, SGA's great night, because I agree, Cason was great tonight, and he kind of just busted out his own slam dunk contest out of nowhere tonight. He had that breakaway dunk, and at the time I said, wow, that's one of the best Thunder dunks of the entire year. And then he had one later, that Walker Kessler poster, that was even better. Like, he somehow beat the dunk he had a few minutes earlier that I said was one of the best of the year for this team. And J-Dub in postgame said that he's probably the bounciest player on the team, although he did credit Wiggins. With
J-Dub should have just stuck with that answer because then he rattled off half the roster.
He
mentioned J-Will. That had been a joke. He mentioned Brandon Carlson.
He mentioned Brandon Carlson. He said BC. I was like BC. I was like, Brandon Carlson is the only BC.
I wanted to grab
roster.
the mic back so bad and just ask him simply, just to clarify. BC is Brandon Carlson, the 7'2" guy from Utah. What are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that BC too, because I was like, Carlson, really? Like, I was not familiar with that part of his game. But he did. I went to J-Dub's credit. He pulled himself out of the running. He said, "You guys all saw my dunk attempt tonight." He's like, he was basically saying that, third year J-Dub doesn't have the juice and the bounce that rookie J-Dub did. But yeah, Queso, I thought was great tonight. And his cutting, like you said, just another part of his game that I think that shows something that's stood out from the very beginning, even in the draft process, about Cason Wallace's his basketball IQ, just knowing where to be. And cutting is it's almost like a cheat code in basketball.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you know how to cut and when to cut and where to cut and the space to cut at, it's like an easy 2 points. And you can catch the defense, resting. I think that Cason tonight, it's crazy because a lot of those finishes on those cuts, like, he's going up. I don't know. He's going up against a big. Is he going to finish that?
Yeah.
And he's like, he's tricky. Like, you don't think he's going to get there. You don't think he's going to be able to finish on these bigs. Yeah. And he does every time. He finishes every time. So I continually am impressed by Queso and his overall game. And, all that stuff about his cutting and his dunks. And then last year was the over 40% from three. And really his calling card is defense. Like he's becoming an elite perimeter defender. Like, it's just such a luxury.
He's developed a second elite trait. He's got the elite defense, and now he's got the elite cutting. And it's like, dude, this guy, and we haven't even seen him tap into the on-ball stuff a ton. It's been more so recently. I just think that people forget because he's kind of, and I've said this on the show for a month now, because he was so successful his rookie year, people just put him in that narrow box that Mark was talking about and forget this was a lottery pick a year ago. This guy is nowhere near a finished product. And if he becomes what we think he can become, like, you talk about embarrassment of riches, and that's what the Thunder have. It's just point blank period what the Thunder have. I will say, J-Dub going to J-Will and Brandon Carlson before Isaiah Joe. How quickly we forget the Isaiah Joe dunk on Jeff Green last year. How quickly we forget the Isaiah Joe dunk against Boston. How did we forget Isaiah Joe? And we went to J-Will.
Yeah. Isaiah Joe
you can jump higher than J-Will.
Yeah, the J-Will and the BC, I was like, okay, J-Dub's just a great teammate. He's just like giving props and credit to all these guys.
He's a great troll is what he is. He's a great troll.
That too.
He's also a great teammate though. But
that too.
J-Will, by the way, another quality night from him. Not offensively, he did not shoot the ball well. But defensively, you're starting to see the improvements that he's made. I broke that down on Thunder on SI that you can go read if you want to read, although this is an audio medium, so we'll continue to give you our sweet nothings about the Thunder coming up. But first, I want to say right now, by good friends over at Game Time, Brandon. We were at a live sporting event today. Luckily, we did not have to use Game Time. But this summer, whenever you and I hit up the OKC Comets, we're going to have to use Game Time because I love going to Comet games, live events, sports, music, theater, comedy, whatever you're into, they have it for you at Game Time. You can feel the energy and excitement, and they were unforgettable, especially at OKC Comet games. So now Game Time has made it even easier for you to get tickets to your favorite events. With the new features at Game Time Picks, they filter out all the fluff, and they only show you the incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste your time searching through the thousands of tickets out there. You can just see the best ones right up front. I also love the Game Time all-in pricing feature, the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're going to get. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create your account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Go download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's Game Time. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. J-Dub finishes with 25 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, but where he really got it going was in the second half tonight. And I thought that the second half adjustment from him was excellent. He finishes the second half with 21 of those 25 points, 1 steal, 1 assist, 1 rebound, 4 for 5 from the free throw line, 1 for 2 from 3, and 8 for 13 from the floor, which is 61.5%. He was really efficient in that second half. He helped the Thunder get this win over Utah. Obviously, you want to see him put it together for a full 48-minute game. First game back from the hip injury. It was good to see him moving around so well, playing so well at the end of the game. And now he gets to go back up against the Dallas Mavericks, who have given him fits for the last calendar year now. Brandon, anything on Jacobs tonight before we move on to the Mavericks?
Yeah, I think it was just really encouraging to see him not only play tonight. He was a game time decision. We didn't even know he was going to play until about 20 minutes before tip off. So for the fact that obviously he started off slow, but having 21 points in the second half and ended up having a really efficient night, 25 points, had 2 steals. I thought he was really good defensively, as always, as he has been all season long. His family was in the house tonight. We didn't get to see the J-Dub, C-Dub game because, unfortunately, little brother Cody Williams out with an ankle injury. But Pa Dub and Ma Dub and Sis Dub were in the house tonight with a split jersey. Andrew Schlett tweeted out the picture of the Dub family. So shout out to them and happy that they got to see a 25-point J-Dub night. And the fact that he got to play. How big of a bummer it would have been had they showed up and both Jalen and Cody were out due to injury. So glad Jalen got to play tonight. And he looked like himself that second half.
The next chance is February 21st in Utah, which I don't believe is called the Vivint Center anymore. It's now called the Delta Center. Still a great arena. It was there for the All-Star weekend in Salt Lake City. It was beautiful, great place. Not just saying that because David Locke is responsible for signing my checks. It's really a cool place. We'll talk about the differences about Utah on a different pod. This is not the time or place. But Brandon, Mavericks tomorrow, second night of a back-to-back, which makes it incredibly hard to preview because, like we said earlier, no injury reports for either side until 1 o'clock today, which is where we're going to get a clearer picture. What we do know is that there's no Chet Holmgren. Isaiah Hartenstein still missed this game. We're still waiting on an injury update from him. And no AJ Mitchell, of course, for the Thunder. For the Mavericks, we know no Luka Doncic. We know no Derek Lively, who's out somewhere between 4 weeks and 3 months. So we had a load of that down the line. And then Kyrie Irving today, post-game, was asked if he's going to play in Oklahoma City on Thursday. And he said, TBD. And you know what? I respect that answer. I know Kyrie, heavily scrutinized. But Brandon, aren't we all day-to-day in this thing we call life? I mean, Lord willing, we'll both be at the game tomorrow, but it's not promised. Today's a gift. That's why they call it the present. Tomorrow's a mystery and yesterday's history. Brandon, the bottom line is, no matter who shows up, as we saw last week, in my opinion, no matter who shows up, no matter who suits up, no matter who plays, this is going to get heated. Do you buy into the Thunder Mavericks rivalry?
100%. If I could say 1,000%, I'd say 1,000%. And it's the teams themselves. It's the players themselves. It's the fans. Like, no matter where you look, whether you're looking on the court and you see these dust ups in this last game, look, there's some history there with the Mavs and the Thunder, going back to the Dirk versus Russ, KD, Harden teams. Then there's some history, obviously, Oklahoma, Texas. Enough said there. And now you have this whole Shai versus Luka, who's the better player, drafted in the same draft.
Versus PJ.
Yes.
Who does the opposing fan base hate more?
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. There's so much between these two teams. And then the fans, it's boiling over, on social media.
Oh, the fans, sickening.
Mavs fans.
It's so bad, Brandon. I just want to get this on my chest. It's so bad that this week on the pod, we've been talking about Dallas, we've been talking about the Thunder, been talking about the series. On every single bleeping pod, I've picked the Thunder to beat Dallas in a playoff series. And yet the comments, you would think that based on the comments that I predicted the Mavs to sweep Oklahoma City. I predict the Thunder to beat Dallas in the playoffs and go to the NBA Finals. And the tension is so high that that's not good enough. It's not good enough to pick the Thunder to beat the Mavs and to go to the finals. You have to just say that the Thunder are going to stomp them. And it's just okay, sure.
Well, I was going to say Mavs fans do not like the Thunder. Thunder fans do not like the Mavs. But I guess there's one thing that both fan bases can agree on. Not big fans of Rylan Stiles when it comes to picking Mavs versus Thunder, I guess.
I mean, geez Louise, you pick the Thunder and everyone's against you. The Thunder fans are saying you didn't pick them by enough. Mavericks fans are saying, why'd you pick them? We can't pick them, Brandon. But, we'll be back tomorrow to recap that Mavs game. We'll see if I can talk Brandon into another show, but we'll be back on the OKC Dream Team recapping it tomorrow night. Brandon, you're on dailythunder.com. Been great to have Ryan Woods in town on the beat as well from that same site. 1077 The Franchise, at Brandon Rabaron on Twitter. Again, appreciate you always hopping on and helping us through these games. I just needed somebody to bounce something off of with Shai going for 54. It felt like more of a celebration than anything else. You can find me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Check out Thunder on SI as well. Subscribe to Locked On Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from. And I hope you go back and listen to our first edition of our weekly show, Locked On NBA Squads, where the Western Conference hosts get together for a roundtable each week, discuss big topics. Clearly, I was a big part of this week because it was about the Thunder and their contender status. I'm going to try to make every single week, so you can go check that out in the feed, as well as a bonus episode each week to look forward to. Brandon, again, I appreciate you joining us, and until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.